Well, hello YouTube. Here we are in part 3 of the garage door build. Of course, in this part here, we're going to be doing the remainder of the brick mold, as well as, of course, weather stripping along the bottom. And then we're going to paint some 1x3s and do a little design on the door here. And then basically, that's going to be probably the finished product. Of course, I've worked a little bit off camera on this here door. I've installed a couple little thingies here, of course a latch or two, and you know, a few things like that. But of course, we still got the brick mold over here, and the brick mold over here. And well, a couple days ago I installed the top brick mold up there. But other than that, that's pretty much her. Of course, I've got to fill the nail holes up there, and then of course give everything a final coat. A little bit of paintable silicone there in the corners, and then of course painting all the wood that's not blue. So of course I've got me a chunk of brick mold there in the saw, already all measured out and pretty much good to go. So we'll make our first cut and then get at her. A little bit of a windy day today, guys, so I'll pretty much do the work and then I'll check on in kind of as we go. Okay guys, the brick mold is up. Of course I chose this time around to use screws over nails, but hey, I guess you know, that way they are removable if in the event they need to be. Of course, you know, all the sides are on, everything went together fairly well, didn't really have much of any issues. Of course, I had to rip down the 2x4s, you know, before I painted them so they would fit. But other than that, you know, it was fairly smooth sailing. So basically, I'm going to hit this with the sander just to give her a bit of a rough up. You know, I do have some, you know, some little blemishes and a few things to take care of. Then once, of course, it's roughed on up, give her a fill, of course, on all these screw heads, nail heads, and blemishes and stuff. And then basically we can get out the blue paint and do a little bit of touch-ups. Reason why I want to do a little bit of touch-ups is, of course, you know, you see there's a little bit of you know, blemishes on the door there where I did some drilling and you know, some other modifications. So of course, you know, we can touch all that up and you know, make her good. And of course, once that blue paint is dry, the white paint should be dry on the, you know, little boards for the design, and pretty much when she's good to go, we can put it all together. Okay guys, so here we are. Of course, all that white you see is the paintable silicone. Of course, got her all the way around the seams. Basically filled in a little bit of area there where the wood wasn't quite true. Essentially, that's basically what I use it for. And of course, once that's all good and dry, you know, we can basically paint this all blue. Like I said earlier, doing the touch-ups on the doors and a few things like that. Well, I'm just prepping the trim here. Of course, got to open it out of the old package. Okay guys, so here we are. We got our trim bundle out here. I'm just opening on out. I'm going to lay them on pretty much out here. Then of course we're going to give our old paint a stir, make sure it's still good. If she's still good, then we'll slap a coat of paint on it. If it's not, well then I'll have to make another trip down to the old hardware store, pick me up another can of paint, and then go on from there. So yeah, you guessed her, next time you see these boards, they're going to be white. Well, as you see here, all 10 boards are all nice and white. Of course I had enough in that can there to do a good coat on them. And I probably have enough left in that can to do a second coat if needed. I'm probably going to hit them a second time because they are soaking in. These are trim boards. They will take a little bit of weather, of course, and you know, abuse and beating. So I'll probably give them a second coat. Of course, the way the temperature is right now, you know, it is getting pretty cold at night. So of course they'll probably have to dry for a couple of days, and well, then they'll be good to put them on up. So basically, while I'm waiting for well, paint to dry, I can come over here and well, I'm going to install my weather stripping at well, the bottom of the door there, just to keep you know, rain, snow, leaves, critters out of there. And then once that's installed, of course, the silicone should be dry, and then we can give the blue a coat, and then of course install our trim boards. Well guys, here we are. Our silicone is all nice and dry now. Of course, it's a beautiful day to take advantage of, well, painting and all that. Of course, I've got to touch up the trim there where I hit her with the sander. Touch up the silicone. That'll take a couple of coats. Pretty much same with the hinges in here. I gotta touch all that up. That'll again take a couple of coats to do all that. And then of course I'll probably do some of the blemishes like I mentioned there on the door. This one here was a mishap on the install, and of course you know, a few other little things on there. Of course I've got my well, wonderful blue paint here pretty much all ready to go. Got myself a well used brush here pretty much ready to go as well. And of course the trim, it has dried very well. I don't know if I'm going to get her installed you know, today or not. That might be another day's project, but I'm not sure if we'll be able to install her right now because the blue paint's going to be wet here for a bit. But you never know, it might dry and then we can get at her. Not going to sand her down and give her a second coat or nothing because, well, it's just trim boards. You know, if I was doing something in the house or so, I would sand her down, get rid of all the fuzzies, and then give her a second coat. But like I said guys, the whole project there is nearing completion, and of course we can get things done, get her done while the weather's nice and warm, because, well, this is Canada, right? She's going to turn cold, and yeah, we'll wish we had her done. Well guys, here we are. We got the, well, first coat of blue onto the inner trim, if you want to say. Of course, I did the inner jamb there, of course, where the door rests, all the way around, of course. I didn't do the inside edge here. If this camera will focus, because that's going to be white when I paint the garage. I probably could do the inside edge because that would make a nice contrast against the white. However, it would clash with the trim that I'm planning on using because it's going to be a lighter blue, so you don't want to get too busy, of course. The outer trim, of course, I'm going to do with the roller and up, and of course this area here. I'll probably put a bead of tape right there on the top drip edge, or whatever you want to call her, because I got to get right up there to roll it. And of course I'm probably going to throw a bead of tape right there and touch that up with the brush while I got the brush going. And of course, same with this side here. We'll let the paint, you know, semi-dry, and then we'll probably give her another coat because there's a few areas here where, you know, you can still see the white of the silicone, like I figured we were gonna. And then I'll probably take a fine brush, and then of course touch, you know, around the bolts. You know, kind of where it blew through. If I really wanted to, I could just leave it, because chances are the trim will cover, you know, a lot of these bolts. It probably won't cover this guy here, you know, but I can just touch up specific ones, and then if they do still show after the trim, I can give it a secondary touch up too. So I might do either way, because technically I could install the trim if I don't do any or very little painting on the door, so it depends, right? Like I said guys, all in all, the old project is coming along fairly well. We're kind of in the finishing or end type of stages, so you know, that's always nice to see a project come together, and well, in the end stages, because, well, that means you can move on to something else and, you know, go with the flow, right? And of course, you know, you always got projects in the back of your mind to do, and more as time goes on as well. So basically guys, going to take a little bit of a breather here. When the paint's dry, we'll come on back. Okay guys, so here we go. Just gave the well, inner trim again a touch-up second coat. Of course, it's coming along fairly well. I did up here on the edge of the board there where I had a cutter after I painted. And now, of course, I'm going to roller the flat surfaces, roller the top area there. I might have to brush touch up near the drip edge, but hey, that's, you know, minor. And then, of course, same with down here, I'm going to have to roller that. And I'll probably touch up a couple areas on this, you know, flat edge of the door. And then I'll probably throw a bead of tape along this white edge here where I had to do some gentle fitment issues there. And of course I got the metal there, so I'll tape that and then I can roller or brush touch this whole edge. And then basically, you know, the painting, probably some minor touch-ups, but other than that, the painting's basically done on, well, this here door. And once that's all dry, we can install, you know, the trim and all that, and then we're basically a finished project. I did the final touch-ups, basically went on over it again, made sure I didn't miss any, well, you know, nail holes, screw holes. I touched up all of them. Basically, they're basically all good. Went around and made sure I didn't miss any little pieces or anything that's going to cause any issues over, well, winter, right? Of course, next season, next year, I'll probably go through this again, you know, and give it another coat, especially on the, well, weathering surfaces, just to make sure, you know, because this thing has to last for a couple of seasons and all. But guys, pretty much we're done painting for right now. Gotta let this all dry, and then of course we'll throw the trim on her. And of course I got a couple little, you know, added features to put on the door here. I've got a little, you know, fake type of handle. It would be used to close it, of course, because when it does come together, it's hard to get her tight. So the two handles will come and you can, you know, pull her tight, and then of course put your latch and stuff like that on. And then basically, well, away she goes. Well guys, here we are. Pretty much we got ourselves a beautiful day unfolding us ahead of here. Well, we got all set up, of course, with our handy dandy Mastercraft sliding dual beveled compound miting fancy saw. Have ourselves our trim boards. Of course, they dried there a while ago. And of course, all the blue paint here on the door, all the touch-ups I did. Basically, everything's good to go. The doors did not stick when I shut them, of course, with the semi-fresh paint on them. So, you know, that's a double bonus as it is. Of course, now it's time to install the trim boards. There's several ways to install the trim boards. I've seen some online photos, you know, sometimes I've seen some with a fancy little arch across the top, and I've seen some that are basically square, and then they have a middle rail across the middle, and then of course I've seen some with fancy cuts in the middle, and you know, kind of a window type of design and a few things. Well, I think if everything goes good and my material cuts the way it's supposed to, I'm gonna do a perimeter frame, you know, with pretty much all the way around, with 45s in the corners, and then I'm gonna take and run a well, another trim basically from corner to corner, and kind of give it that middle, if you will, barn door type of design. It should all go okay. My bolts are, well, semi countersunk. I may have to put a wrench on them just to suck them in a little more, but of course not too much, or else I'll start cutting through the plywood. And then of course for the bottom boards here, for the 45s, I'll have to run them through the table saw and shave off a, you know, whatever that would be, an 1/8 or so off the back to clear the weather stripping, and of course the screws on the weather stripping. Other than that, that's basically going to be probably the most technical part, is of course the bottom weather stripping part, and then of course cutting all the 45s, which aren't a huge deal as long as you take your time, make sure your angles are correct, and really go on from there. So of course guys, like I said, pretty much all set up here, got everything I need to do the job, just have to basically get on at her, and yeah, you guessed her. We'll see how it goes and catch you all later. Okay guys, so here we go. Well, as you see there, we got the top two trims on, both left and right, and of course the bottom ones, remember I had to trim them, basically cutting a groove in the back side of them so they clear the weather stripping screws and such. And of course it does look a little crooked, however it is dead nut square. Just like I figured when I built the doors and stuff, this floor in this garage has heaved. They always do in the middle. Even the double wide doors heave in the middle eventually, which causes issues with the doors. So it is dead nut level with the world, I guess you could say. Well, just finished cutting, of course, the right door here, of course. The trim, you know, basically notching her out. And of course, not sure if you guys can see this, if this camera will focus. And of course, as you see there, there's a groove cut, basically, if you want to say a blade width, or, you know, 2 blade widths, if you want to say. And basically what I do now is I stick the old chisel in there and basically pry it away, and it'll split right along the grain of the wood, virtually right next to where the cut ends. And then of course I clean up the cut with the chisel so it's, you know, square, and pretty much make sure she's dead nut level again with the world on the door, and, you know, nail her on in place. Well guys, here we go. Got that well, back cut or groove or slice, whatever you want to call her, cleaned up. Of course, there's probably a better way of doing it than, well, setting your fence on the table saw and basically effectively just, you know, jamming her on through, letting the blade do the cutting, and well, away she goes. Probably got something to do with like a router table or something fancy, but hey, you know, when you're working with what you got, you kind of got to make do. The router that I have is okay and all. It works on, you know, making your own moldings and stuff like that, but it doesn't quite do the 100% job that I need it to do. So hey, eventually maybe I'll get a new router table or have to build my own or something, but until then, this method here works for me, and well, I'll continue it going. So pretty much I'm going to throw some measurements. I'll throw my big you know, 6-foot level there across from the left door to the right door, and basically take my levelness off the first one, transfer it to the second one, and well, you know, you pretty much guess the rest, nail her on. And then of course I got to measure out the well, the vertical, you know, 4 pieces, if you will, give them a cut, and then of course measure out the cross piece, you know, whichever direction I choose to put it, measure them 2 out and give them a cut. Pretty much, as long as I don't screw up, make no bad cuts, we'll have exactly the amount of wood I need, and we'll have some like 3-foot cutoffs when we're done to, well, do another project with. Well guys, there we go. Pretty much got the trim all up. She's all good, nailed down and everything. Even had, well, time there to install the door handles. I would call her a finished project at this point. However, of course, I've got to go around and fill the nail holes and touch up a couple of the, well, the seams, like the angle cuts where they weren't 100% perfect. And never fails, on the last cut of the last board, of course, there was a knot here, and of course it had to break exactly where the knot was, and of course there was no way around it. I couldn't have cut the board, you know, at either end, because I needed the full length board. If I would have looked at my materials when I was cutting the shorter boards, I probably could have cut that knot right out of there and used it on, you know, one of these guys. You know, I had 4 chances. But I guess that's what you get when you buy a bundle of wood and just, you know, slap paint on her. You know, don't give it a sand or nothing. Well, of course, the, well, handles here, they only sent out 1 black lag bolt per handle. So, of course, I got to use one of my chrome or silver bolts with a silver washer. And that's why there's tape on there, because of course it's masked off so I can paint it black. Then of course I've got, you know, touch-ups and blemishes, and I messed up here at this one angle, so I gotta, you know, jam some wood filler in there to you know, compensate for that. But other than that, the old project's coming along good. Like I said, I would call her a completed project right now, but she needs to be filled and then given, you know, one final coat, one final touch-up, and then basically she'll be done. Well guys, here we are, another day on the project. Of course, what I'm hoping to be the final day, of course. Of course, here you've seen us do all the trim and, well, everything like that, of course. Well, the emergency triage board is, well, it held, it glued, of course. It's like how I planned it to be. My crack filler is, well, all dry, ready for touch-up on paint. And I even, of course, off camera, after I shut her on down, I even masked this off and gave her a, well, a couple of good old coats. Of course, they were the silver type of bolts. They weren't galvanized, but they were the silver bolts. I probably could have ran them through a sandblaster if I had one in my collection. But, you know, I didn't have one in there, so you kind of got to make do with what you got. So pretty much, guys, I'm going to peel back the tape, run a little, you know, blade around the washers there to cut the tape away from the handle, and then we'll see if, well, all that paint was worth doing. Well, guys, here we are on what I'm hoping is going to be the final day on this here project. I did a little bit of adjustments the other day off camera, so I had to do a little bit of more filling, which of course made the time, you know, go one more day so the, you know, wood filler would dry. Well, pretty much, you know, I touched up all the nail holes, touched up the seams, you know, gave an extra touch here and there, and well, as you see, it's time to put paint on it because, well, the white silicone is actually attracting dirt, and by it attracting dirt, it's, you know, standing on out from it being white. Of course, I've already given it a wipe down the best I can, and well, we're going to get some paint on her. So let's get set on up, and well, our next check-in will be when the paint is drying. Well, guys, here we are. I gave, well, the nails and all that one coat of paint. She's basically good to go. She's drying now. Of course, once she, you know, dries reasonable, I will look for any spots that I missed and give it a recoat. Pretty much I did the same on this door here. This door here, I don't know, it got some dirt at the bottom there, so I had to wipe, you know, a little extra there. So I guess once the trim dries, I'm going to have to, well, wipe her again or hose it off or something. But other than that, we're like 15-20 minutes away from, well, calling it a finished, you know, project. Which is nice because, well, once that's done, we can move on to the next mini project. And then, well, continue on from there. So, we'll see you when it's dry. Well, guys, here we are, part 3 of the garage door build. This is the final segment of this part 3 video. Well, as you see here, well, we've done the touch-ups to the trim here. All the crack fillers filled and everything's dry. All the nail holes have been, well, touched up, and it's all good to go. So, of course, yesterday I threw me on a good old coat of paint there, as you've seen. And, well, it dried fairly well. However, it got dark before I could get back to shooting this segment here. Well, basically, guys, she is a finished project. Pretty much good to go. Time to edit up the 3-part videos. Get them on up to the YouTube so you guys can enjoy them. And as always, thanks for watching Maxwell's World. Comment, subscribe, and enjoy.